sinking of the Titanic is one of the most famous and tragic stories of all time. But how she met her fate was not just the result of a collision between a liner and an iceberg.
From the very day that she was designed, she was almost doomed.
Astonishing new scientific evidence reveals the chain of events that brought about the demise of a ship that was thought to be unsinkable and led to the death of over 1,500 people, the greatest maritime loss in modern history.
There was a lot of questions surrounding what role the materials played in the sinking of the ship.
For the first time, scientists believe they have uncovered the last piece of the puzzle that has baffled experts for almost half a century. A mystery that involves a fateful combination of design flaws and poor choice of shipbuilding materials that set the Titanic on a collision course with death and destiny. April 14th, 1912. In the dead of night on a flat, calm sea, an extraordinary event is taking place. An iceberg with a mass of 500,000 tons drifts into the path of the Titanic.
Iceberg, right ahead.
Hard a starboard!
They have seconds to react.
Come on.
At 11:39 p.m., Titanic scrapes the iceberg. Officers believe they have avoided disaster. But below the waterline, it is another story. News about the number of lives lost breaks one day after the disaster. Among the dead are some of the most wealthy and influential celebrities of the day, as well as hundreds of poor immigrants dreaming of a new life in America. Grieving relatives of the victims in Britain and the US are stunned and desperate to know how the impossible could have happened. The Titanic was designed to be the most luxurious and also the safest ship ever built. Even if rammed by another ship, she was designed to stay afloat. Yet she took only 2 hours to sink after colliding with an iceberg. Now, almost 100 years later, some questions still remain unanswered. Who or what was responsible? And why did the mightiest ship of her time sink so quickly? Forensic metallurgist Jennifer Hooper McCarty is piecing together the events that took place on that fateful journey. She is re-examining forensic evidence recovered from the wreck, along with survivor testimony and archive records from 1912.
We have very little knowledge of what that impact was like. What we do know is only based on the survivor testimony from 1912.
2 weeks after the sinking of the Titanic, a British public inquiry is held. A panel of judges will decide who was to blame for the disaster and loss of over 1,500 lives. The key witness is Bruce Ismay, the 50-year-old chairman of White Star, the owner of Titanic. He is one of the few men who survived the maiden voyage. Wireless operator Harold Bride and Second Officer Charles Lighthaller also testify. These three men's testimony are vital in deciding who was to blame.
I gather that you yourself gave the instructions for the building of the Titanic.
Yes.
And of course you considered the question of floatability of the ship in cases of accident or emergency.
We did.
Did you give any special consideration to the question of providing additional lifeboat accommodation?
I think the position was taken that the ship was looked upon as being practically unsinkable. She was looked upon as a lifeboat herself.
Two years before the scheduled launch date, Ismay met with his chief designer, Alexander Carlyle.
Much longer entrance into the room here. We can. The staircase needs to be much grander.
The bulkhead will have to be lowered.
Is there a problem? Isn't she safe?
Of course. Excuse me.
The bulkheads are partitions used to create watertight compartments in the hull of the ship, each of which could be isolated and sealed off to contain flooding in the event of an emergency. The higher the bulkheads, the safer the ship, as it would be more likely that water could be contained within any damaged compartments.
Each of the 16 compartments is watertight. In the event of a leak, each compartment can be sealed up by an electric-powered door operated from the bridge. Even if 4 compartments flood, she'll stay afloat.
Good. Let's lower the bulkheads then.
The height of the watertight compartments will be lowered to
I
just
gotta
3
say, I
meters
feel
above
like
the
number
waterline.
3, Demo 3, was much better looking and optimized.
The boat deck should not be so cluttered.
Cluttered.
Yes, cluttered. People don't pay to look at lifeboats.
Well, I thought 48 to be a reasonable amount. Especially if the Board of Trade increased the requirements.
Well, let's not second-guess the British Board of Trade, shall we? Let's move on to the Grand Salon.
And this meeting with Mr. Ismay lasted 4 hours.
Yes, we talked about the whole of the decorations of the ship.
Never mind the decorations, we're talking about lifeboats.
Well, the lifeboat part, I suppose, took about 5 or 10 minutes.
How many lifeboats did you think there ought to be?
I thought there ought to be 3 on each set of davits.
And how many would that make altogether?
48 boats.
You thought there ought to be 48.
Yes.
Whereas in point of fact, how many were there?
16.
16.
While the design of Titanic is being changed, 2,000 miles away, nature is unleashing a terrible force. A glacier made of 10,000-year-old snow reaches the ocean. A mass of ice weighing up to 2 million tons, the equivalent of over 5 Empire State Buildings, breaks free. It is just one of 40,000 icebergs born each year along the Greenland coast. Its chances of survival are small, but this iceberg is different. During the next 2 years, a bizarre chain of events, misjudgments, and human errors would set this iceberg and the Titanic on course to collide. 1 month later, the ocean currents carry it on an incredible journey.
Tens of thousands of icebergs break off of Greenland every year, come down the coast of Labrador and Newfoundland, and a very small percentage of those, maybe only 1 to 4%, will make their way to where they become a threat to shipping.
As the iceberg continues up the West Greenland coast, work begins on the Titanic. It will take 2 years to build and be the largest man-made moving object in the world. Shipbuilding is in transition. Machines are replacing men, steel replacing iron. The vast hull of the Titanic is designed to be watertight by overlapping steel plates and 3 million rivets driven in using a hydraulic machine. But the machine is so cumbersome, it could be used only on straight sections of the ship. At the curved area of the bow, they had to drive rivets in manually, but steel rivets were too tough to hammer in. So instead they used wrought iron rivets, which are much more malleable. This will potentially weaken a small area of the bow section, but it's a widespread practice, and nothing unusual has ever come of it. In the summer of 1911, the iceberg is now 18 months old and heading towards Baffin Bay, an area where most icebergs come to the end of their journey.
All along the path of the movement of an iceberg, there are numerous bays and shallow water areas where icebergs can be trapped. Most of it is destroyed before it ever reaches as far south as the island of Newfoundland.
But this iceberg manages to break free of Baffin Bay and continues its journey south. Over the next 6 months, Titanic is in the final stages of being fitted out. An army of carpenters and craftsmen are at work, creating the interior splendor of the ship. The captain chosen for the maiden voyage is Edward John Smith, the most experienced captain in the White Star Line. It is to be his last voyage before retiring.
He was nicknamed the Millionaire's Captain. People like Guggenheim or even J.P. Morgan would actually change their sailings and their travel arrangements so that they could sail in a ship commanded by Captain Smith.
March 1912. The Olympic, Titanic's sister ship, returns to port for emergency repairs. So the maiden voyage of the Titanic is pushed back a month. It will now be sailing in mid-April, the month when most icebergs appear in the shipping lanes in the North Atlantic. Against all odds, the iceberg that fell into the sea 2 years earlier has made it as far south as the east coast of Newfoundland. And it's still a colossus with a mass of over 500,000 tons, more than 10 times the weight of the Titanic. And it's drifting a further 17 kilometers a day, directly into the path of the major shipping lanes. Titanic leaves Belfast for Southampton, where it picks up its first passengers. But the unexpected delay of the Titanic's maiden voyage forces Captain Smith to make a last-minute reshuffle of his crew.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. As you all know, the Olympic is currently laid up. It has therefore been decided that the Olympic's chief officer, Mr. Wilde, will be joining us as chief officer. So, Mr. Murdoch, you will now be first officer, and Mr. Lightoller, you will be second officer. Mr. Blair, I would like to have a word with you in private.
Can you believe it?
The arrival of officers from the Olympic means that Murdoch and Lightoller are both demoted. Second Officer Blair is asked to leave the ship. Blair is so keen to get off the ship, he accidentally takes with him the key to his locker. It's a crucial oversight. His locker contains the binoculars for the lookouts in the crow's nest. The day before its maiden voyage to New York, the Titanic is given its final check by a British Board of Trade inspector.
16 standard lifeboats, passenger capacity 65, 70 if push comes to shove.
Reducing the number of lifeboats to 16 means there is now only enough space for 1,000 people, fewer than half on board. The size of ocean liners had quadrupled in the 15 years before Titanic set sail, but the Board of Trade's lifeboat regulations remain the same. The Titanic is approved. 16 lifeboats is deemed satisfactory for over 2,000 people. RMS Titanic leaves Southampton docks for New York with 600 crew and over 1,500 passengers. Even though the Titanic is the latest in luxury liners, it isn't just carrying millionaires. Many are third-class passengers emigrating to the United States in search of a new life. One of those was Milvina Dean, then a 10-week-old baby traveling with her parents.
My father was going to open a tobacconist shop in Kansas. He spent all his money on that, and then couldn't afford to do anything else but go third class, because it was such a luxury ship. All the millionaires were on it, and also the most important thing was they said it was unsinkable.
After picking up more passengers in France and Ireland, Captain Smith's plan is to cross the Atlantic in 6 days. He will need to cross the ocean at just over 19 knots, the equivalent of 35 kilometers an hour. Captain Smith is well aware of the risk from springtime icebergs. To keep his ship out of harm's way, he plots a southern route across the Atlantic, away from the known ice region. The vast white iceberg continues to drift even further southward towards the Grand Banks. Despite being eroded by the sea, it is still over 4 times the size of the Titanic.
Approximately 1/8 of the mass of an iceberg is above the sea surface. The classic term, of course, is just the tip of the iceberg. Most of the mass is below the ocean surface and unseen. What's above the surface is a relatively small portion of the ice.
But back in 1912, ships have to rely on ice warnings from other vessels and from their lookouts in the crow's nest. The Titanic is already over halfway across the Atlantic. Her 200-foot-tall masts support aerials that allow her state-of-the-art wireless system to communicate with other ships up to 600 kilometers away. Senior wireless operator Jack Phillips is starting to receive ice warnings from other ships that are further to the west of them. The first ice warning of the day is from the liner the Coronia. It gives the location of an area of ice and icebergs that is 1 day away from the Titanic. Jack Phillips works a shift system with his assistant, Harold Bride.
You were appointed by the Marconi Company to serve as assistant wireless operator on the Titanic.
Yes.
Was Mr. Phillips the senior operator?
Yes.
Bride and Phillips are not employed by the Titanic, but by Marconi.
Was a long breakfast?
Although they maintain communication with other ships, sending passenger messages is how they earn their money.
Dear Jenny, Roger has proposed. Said yes, and frightfully worried, I said yes to Arthur before leaving. Love, sis.
First of many, no doubt.
Need anything before I turn him?
Yeah, you can take this to Captain Smith.
Supposing a message comes to the Marconi room for the captain, what do you do?
I will take it along to the captain.
I suppose this would be a piece of paper.
Yes, it's a piece of paper. It'd be enclosed in an envelope.
Sir, there's a lifeboat drill at 11 a.m.
11, eh?
Yes, sir.
Sir, Mr. Captain Smith.
Thank you, Mr.
Bride, sir.
Ice warnings are not unusual in spring, and the ice region mentioned in the Coronia message is a long way from the Titanic.
I shall be at the church service, Mr. Murdoch, and then I shall be making my rounds.
Yes, sir. Guess that means lifeboat drill's cancelled.
The captain never gives a reason why he cancels the lifeboat drill. In the event of an emergency, the crew are unrehearsed. While the captain is reading his sermon, the iceberg is carried further south over the Grand Banks by the Labrador Current and is now less than 600 kilometers away. It will soon hit another ocean current that makes its way along the east coast of the United States. This current carries a block of warm water, the Gulf Stream. It can be as warm as 18 degrees Celsius. Icebergs in these sea conditions will deteriorate quickly with the slapping of waves. A medium iceberg might be gone in as little as 10 days. The Titanic is heading southwest towards the Gulf Stream. It should be on a course that takes it out of the path of any icebergs. The Titanic receives the second ice warning of the day. It is from the steamship Baltic and gives the location of a region that contains icebergs. The MSG prefix would show it is so important, it was for the captain's attention. There will be 5 ice warnings during the day, but this will be the last that the captain will receive. 2 o'clock that afternoon, the captain hands the message to Ismay.
Anyone would think we're heading towards the North Pole.
2 weeks after the disaster, the inquiry will attempt to prove that Ismay had wanted the captain to keep to schedule and ignore any ice warnings.
Why do you think the captain handed you the Marconigram?
As a matter of information, I take it.
You knew, of course, that the proximity of icebergs was a danger. You knew that much, did you not?
There is always a danger with ice.
And you knew that you would be in the region of ice sometime on that Sunday night?
Yes.
And therefore it behoved those who were responsible for the navigation of the ship to be very careful.
Naturally.
Would it not be necessary to slow down for icebergs?
Presumably so, yes.
Then what is the object of continuing at full speed through the night if you expect to meet ice? Why do you do it?
I presume that the captain would be anxious to get through the ice region. He would not want to slow down upon the chance of a fog coming on.
So the object of it is to get through it as fast as you could?
I presume that if a man on a perfectly clear night could see far enough to clear an iceberg, then he would be perfectly justified in getting through the ice region as quickly as possible.
Even somebody like Bruce Ismay would be deferential to the word of Captain Smith. Captain is everything on board a ship. He is God on board. His word is the word of God.
The Titanic is heading in a direction away from the iceberg, but is about to change course. At 5:30 p.m., Captain Smith had planned a change in course from a southwesterly direction to a westerly direction. But because of the earlier ice warning from the Baltic, he delays the change in direction by 20 minutes to allow the ship to travel even further south, towards a safe area of the Gulf Stream and away from the perilous ice region.
South 86 west, Mr. Hitchens. Steady as she goes.
Ironically, he has now put the Titanic on a direct collision course with the iceberg. It's because in 1912, a phenomenon took place that allowed icebergs to travel further south than was ever thought possible. The cold Labrador Current has moved around the iceberg to form a protective layer, insulating it against the warming effects of the Gulf Stream and preventing it from melting. Now everything depends on the path the Labrador Current takes.
The Labrador Current goes where the Gulf Stream permits it to go. Depending upon the exact location of the Gulf Stream, the cold water can move quite far to the south of the tail of the thing. If the Gulf Stream is southward moving, you have relatively cold water pushing very far south into the North Atlantic Ocean, into the shipping lanes. In recent years, icebergs have moved as far south as the latitude of Philadelphia.
As the iceberg pushes its way into the shipping lanes, it's spotted by the Californian, who fires off iceberg warnings to the Titanic. While Phillips rested in the cabin next to the wireless room, his assistant Bride is manning the wireless. Although Bride heard the message from the Californian, he did not respond.
Although you knew that you were called, you had something else to do?
Yes.
What business was it that you were attending to at the time?
I was writing up the accounts.
Wireless operators on the Titanic serve two functions. They relay weather reports and ice warnings, but they are also expected to keep a tally of all the passenger messages they send. At 7:20 p.m., Bride finishes his accounts and then intercepts the message from the Californian. It warns of 3 large icebergs seen at latitude 42 north, longitude 49 west, directly in the path of the Titanic.
It's for the captain. I'm going to the bridge.
But Captain Smith has already left the bridge and is now dining with passengers.
And you simply delivered it to an officer on the bridge?
Hey, what's going on, Chris? There's not a lot to do in it. It's literally just like a check it out kind of thing. The game's not even out yet. This is just a demo of what they have done so far. How's your night going, bud?
This vital message. To this day, nobody knows if the message was delivered. With no reason to change course, Titanic steams ahead, straight into the path.
Yeah, this is a it's a 1-to-1 representation of the Titanic. Yeah, it's real easy to get lost in here. I've been lost a few times already. Oh, is that one of the rooms that are open?
14th, 1912.
Or is this the bugged room with no floor? Oh no, this one's got a floor. Oh yeah, this is the storeroom. But I notice, I know, right? The hallways are like something out of The Shining. Like, just expect to see the little girls walk out at the end of the hallway. Like,
As was the case for all passenger ships of the day, there is no official
I noticed this is the new demo. I noticed it's not nearly as detailed and polished as the old demo was. There's a lot more of the ship you can explore now, but it doesn't look near as good as the old demo, I find.
The Titanic will reach the iceberg in 2 hours.
Yeah, right? You expect to look back and like see Jack Nicholson sprinting with an axe. Like
Low-lying icebergs called growlers.
All icebergs are dangerous, but actually a small iceberg,
ooh, pretty.
which might only be the size of a small car, can be very dangerous. Granted, the risk of a ship colliding with it is probably lower, but
okay, so this is what? Second class, I do believe. So this is a second class room. Pretty basic, like not a whole lot.
Keep a sharp lookout for ice.
You should see the first class room. First class rooms are like, whoa. I was trying to find the Turkish bath.
A growler really is the worst form of ice. It's a larger berg that is melted down.
Oh, are we out on the deck now? Yeah.
Lower in the water and
So this is part of the deck. So you couldn't go out here before in the old demo.
21 knots. 21 knots is about 700 yards a minute. Is your view that you could see a growler at a safe distance at night time going at that pace?
I judge that I could see a growler at 1.5 miles. Or more, probably 2 miles.
In the whole game, in the full release, they're doing the entire sinking. So all of this is gonna sink and fill up with water. And they're doing it properly, like with true water physics. So like air and water will actually like blow up stairwells and stuff. It's pretty neat.
Over its 2-year journey, the iceberg has reduced in size.
But yeah, they're doing a real-time sinking of it. It's supposed to be like a whole story with like actual like passengers on the ship and stuff. And like I said, this is just a demo to see what they've got done so far, right? What is this? The cigar room? See, that's what I hate about this new demo, is like in the old one, all the rooms were labeled, so you knew what room you were walking into, right?
It's cold.
Yes, it is cold, sir.
Not much wind either.
No, sir. As a matter of fact, it's a flat calm.
Yes, a flat calm.
Those fucking spittoons. Nasty.
You both realized at the time that since it was a flat calm, it would be more difficult to see the ice.
As far as the case of the berg is concerned, yes, it would be much more difficult. Naturally, you wouldn't see the water breaking on it if there were no wind, so you would not have that to look for.
Holy man, this thing is huge. They need a mini-map, yeah, absolutely.
There should be a certain
I'm
amount of
lost.
reflected light from the icebergs.
Okay, I can't get through that door.
Yes, providing it remains
Gonna
clear.
play the piano. Let me play the
If it becomes
piano.
at all doubtful, let me know at once.
Yes, sir. Good night, sir.
Good night, Mr. Lightwater.
But the game's supposed to be out sometime this year. 2022 is what they were going
Well,
for.
that looks like carelessness, you know. That we should recklessly bang on and slap her into an iceberg regardless of anything. But undoubtedly, we should not do that.
What I want to suggest to you is that it was recklessness. In view of the abnormal conditions and in view of the knowledge you had that ice was in the immediate vicinity to
Are we at
proceed
the
21.5
stern of the
knots.
ship?
Then all I can
Yes.
say is that
We're
recklessness
at the
applies to
stern.
practically every commander in every ship that crosses the Atlantic Ocean.
Phillips
No
is
way to
under a
get back
tight
down
deadline.
from here,
He has
eh?
only a 2-hour window to send every passenger message while the Titanic is
Nope.
in range of the Cape Race receiver at Newfoundland.
Oh, can I
He is
drive it from
interrupted
here?
by the
Let me
fifth
drive
and
it.
most critical ice warning of the day. It is from another ship, the SS Mesaba, giving the precise location of an area containing icebergs that is now only 80 kilometers away from the Titanic. This would alert the captain that the Titanic is heading straight towards the iceberg. But the warning came without the critical MSG prefix. Phillips interprets the message as non-urgent and goes back to sending passenger messages. The closest ship to the Titanic, the Californian, sends a message to say that they have stopped for the night because of ice. But their wireless operator has not waited for Phillips to stop sending his messages and overrides it with a powerful signal.
Ah, bloody idiot.
Phillips replies to tell the Californian to stop sending ice warnings while he is busy with passenger messages.
Oh, no, I've got a documentary going up on the other monitor. Just something for background noise, right? Because this demo has, like...
Still plowing through this lot. You want me to take over? When I go back to sleep.
The demo has, like, no sound in it. Very little.
The Californian's response is to turn off its wireless equipment for the night. The Titanic has now lost radio contact with the only ship less than 2 hours away. By 11:30 p.m., the iceberg is just 6 kilometers away. Traveling at 40 kilometers an hour, the Titanic will collide with it in 10 minutes.
Anything?
No, sir.
The earlier decision by Officer Blair to leave with the keys to the binoculars locker now comes into play. Lookouts Fleet and Lee have to rely on their own eyesight.
Can you explain to my lord why glasses were not provided for the lookout men on the Titanic?
No, I cannot offer any explanation.
If it had been a matter in your discretion, would you have provided them then?
Had they been on the ship, I might have done.
Had you glasses on the bridge?
We had.
So that there would be from time to time during the whole course of the voyage a pair of glasses available.
On the bridge.
On the bridge, which could have been handed up or given to the lookout man. If there had been glasses in the crow's nest, would you have used them?
Yes.
Constantly?
Yes.
After all, you are the man who discovered the iceberg. If it was necessary to have glasses, do you not think you should have gone to the bridge or telephoned to the bridge and said, I'm told to keep a sharp lookout and I have not got any glasses?
They would know that.
But you did not call their attention to it.
No. I did not.
Do you think that if you had had glasses, you could have seen the iceberg sooner?
Certainly.
How much sooner do you think you could have seen it?
In time for the ship to get out of the way.
So that it is your view that if you had had glasses, it would have made all the difference between safety and disaster.
Yes. Here's a minor. Here's a major. Orion.
The iceberg is 100 meters away and closing in on the Titanic, but the lookouts still have not seen it. Because the sea is a flat calm, without binoculars it's impossible for the lookouts to spot an iceberg.
Oh, sorry, my mic was still muted there. Yeah, no, the Titanic is nowhere near the biggest ship anymore. In the day, it was the biggest ship for its time, but I think the Queen of the Seas is the biggest ship now, and it's like, it makes the Titanic look like a Hot Wheels car when you see the comparison picture. If I remember right, the Queen of the Seas is like 20 stories tall or something like that. It's ridiculously big. The hell is this? The valet saloon. Oh, maids. So this is where the maids and everybody would conjugate. Sea-wise giant. Hey, the barber shop is open. You couldn't get in here in the last demo either. Yeah, the detail, it looks like it's going to be fairly detailed. Seems this, like, they even say when you download this demo, like, it is nowhere near finished. This is just, like, the base layout of the ship. And it already looks pretty decent. Like, the demo 3, it was pretty polished, and it looked, like, amazing. It had all the sounds. Yeah, the demo's free.
It as sort of
the base version is anyways. If you do their whole Patreon thing, where I think it's $10 a month, you get free updates. Anytime that they release an update, you get it.
One of the most important pieces of
that was weird.
He talked about standing in boiler room number 6 and seeing water coming in.
Your name is Frederick Barrett.
Yes.
Now just tell us what happened that you saw.
In the stokehold.
Ah, here we go. This is one of the higher end rooms. Like, dude, I would never leave this room. This is ballin'.
This red light came on. I'm the man in charge of the watch. I called out. Shut all dampers.
What was the next thing that happened?
The crash happened before we had them all shut.
Where was this crash?
Water came pouring in, about 2 feet above the stokehold plate.
Can you point to where that is on the ship?
Right? Yeah, really nice room, holy.
The ship's sides was torn.
Wait, is the clock actually working? Holy shit, the clock actually works, like right down to the tick.
Fireman Barrett's testimony suggests that the damage wasn't due to
That's kind of impressive.
fracture, mid-plate or within the hull plates. Instead, it suggests that there may be something wrong with the seams. Maybe the question was really in the rivets, the quality of the rivets.
Is it the right time for you? Let's see. I never even thought to look.
To find out, she decides to analyze all 46
No.
rivets retrieved in 1998
No, it's 11:30
during
here.
an expedition to the wreck of the Titanic. She makes an amazing
That's 5 to
discovery
9 on that
and
one.
gets closer to solving the mystery of what led to the sinking of the Titanic.
I really don't like how stuttery it is sometimes, but that's because of this whole level, procedural level loading. But I tried turning that off and it instantly shot my RAM usage up to like 30 gigs of RAM. I was like, holy shit, like, okay, we'll just turn that back on.
Under different mechanical tests.
Some are found to be made of steel, some are made of iron. Hooper McCarty carries out a groundbreaking experiment. For the very first time, the effects of using iron rivets rather than steel are explored. A section of the Titanic's hull is reproduced.
We compared a wrought iron rivet to a steel rivet and found that with just very little movement of the steel plate, 5 millimeters, you would reach a point in the wrought iron rivet when it would begin to fail.
The test replicates the amount of pressure the Titanic's hull was under during the collision. As the iron rivets fail under the pressure of the iceberg, they snap off one at a time. The Titanic's hull opens up like a zipper, allowing huge amounts of water to flood in.
So here we have a ship that's unsinkable, that's state-of-the-art for 1912, that's built with 1.5-inch thick steel plates and wrought iron rivets.
But as Hooper McCarty continues with her experiments, she realizes she is still missing a vital piece of information. Wrought iron is 30% weaker than steel, but still it should have been strong enough to hold the hull together. Could something else have weakened the rivets? To find out more, she decides to examine the 100-year-old rivets under an electron microscope. She finds large particles embedded in the structure of the iron.
When you look at wrought iron, you see a combination of both iron or pure iron and these impurities that are caught in particles known as slag. Slag can actually strengthen the wrought iron in one direction, but it can weaken it in the opposite direction, in the perpendicular direction.
These slag particles have the potential to make the rivets brittle and prone to fracture. When the wrought iron rivets are hammered into place, the slag particles are at a 90-degree angle. It creates a weakness in the head of the rivets. It is a defect that might have gone completely unnoticed if the ship hadn't struck the iceberg.
During the collision that night, those weak rivets couldn't withstand that force and their heads popped. What Fireman Barrett was probably describing was a parted seam due to the popping of rivet heads.
From the very day that she was designed, she was almost doomed. So this is the, if you like, you could put it as bluntly as this is almost the Achilles heel of the Titanic.
But Hooper McCarty is still not satisfied. Why did the rivets used to build the hull contain so many impurities? The next step in the search for clues leads her to the archives at the shipyard where the Titanic was built. She makes an amazing discovery.
I went to Belfast and looked through the Harland and Wolff archives. From ordering contracts, I was seeing number 3 on
let's see if we can find the engine room here.
which was the standard at the time.
The builders of the Titanic had not ordered number 4, the best and purest grade wrought iron, but a number 3, a lower grade of iron with a much higher concentration of slag impurities. This had a huge effect on the strength of the rivets in the hull of the Titanic.
The critical issue is that with bad or poor quality wrought iron, you end up with a weakness at the head of the rivet. If you have good wrought iron, you don't have that same weakness. It will break, the rivet will fail, but it's going to last a little longer. And 1,500 people, their lives would have been saved. And then a boat could have gotten there and rescued people before the ship was doomed.
What Hooper McCarty couldn't find out is who authorized the purchase of the weaker batch.
I don't believe that at all.
And why?
I think those rivets would have busted either way.
Yes, sir. I sent Boxhall to look for any damage.
The watertight doors are shut off as soon
Alright,
as the
here we go.
collision
Into the
takes
belly of the
place. With the
beast.
rivets on the
E-deck.
hull failing, water is now breaching the gaps in the sides of the ship. At midnight, one of the ship's designers who was on the maiden voyage breaks the shocking news.
Is anything the matter? Have we hit something?
I'm afraid so. We've struck an iceberg.
How bad is it? Is she taking on water?
She's sinking, Mr. Ismay.
But that's impossible.
In 2 hours, she'll be at the bottom of the ocean.
Can't we close off the compartments?
We have, trapping hundreds of men below. But it isn't working.
I don't understand. She's supposed to stay afloat with 4 compartments flooding.
We're flooding in 5 compartments, Mr. Ismay. I'll be in the wireless room, Mr. Murdoch.
Shall I prepare the lifeboat, sir?
Yes, but no need to panic the passengers.
I understand, sir.
The majority of the crew and all the passengers believe that the damage to the ship is minimal, unaware that the ship is letting in water at 400 tons a minute.
The sheer volume of water was so much weight was drawing the bow of the vessel down. And as each compartment went below the water flowed over into the next compartment. The flooding, the mathematical principles of the vessel as each compartment flooding and foundering was set.
Ismay's earlier decision to lower the bulkheads now has a dramatic effect. With higher bulkheads, the flooding in each compartment would have taken longer to fill and overflow into the next compartment. With lower bulkheads, the ship is now flooding rapidly. But the designers didn't lower the front bulkhead because they believed it to be the crucial one. They were anticipating any collision to be head-on. If this happened, the water wouldn't flood beyond the front collision bulkhead. No one imagined an iceberg would collide with the bow. It was the worst possible scenario. This part of the ship wasn't designed to take the force of an impact.
I think if William Murdoch had plowed directly
Oh my god, I want a cigarette.
Titanic would have survived.
In the worst fucking way.
The collision bulkhead, the steel wall, right up to the weather deck, the highest deck within the vessel.
This design for the bulkheads made sense 100 years ago. The last time a ship had struck an iceberg was in 1879, when SS Arizona plowed into one head-on. The bow was badly crushed, but she stayed afloat, proving that the front bulkhead did its job.
Engine room. This is the doctor's quarters, if I remember right.
At midnight, Bride is
No,
due to take over from
apparently
Phillips.
I'm wrong.
It is now 40 minutes after the collision.
A lot of
We
these
still have no
corridors
idea
look
how
the same.
serious the situation is.
Yeah, I'm out till payday.
Took me exactly 3 hours.
Yeah, well done. Have the engines stopped?
Yeah. Apparently we've struck an iceberg.
Okay, so how the
We're
hell?
heading back to Belfast.
Great. That means another shed load of messages. Sorry, dearest, I shan't be coming to New York after all. How much do you make?
A lot.
Mr. Marconi will be pleased.
This is the actual. Oh, you couldn't get in here before either. This is the actual swimming pool. Go for a
It's the miracle
swim.
of wireless, this new technology on board.
There's more here.
It's only 4 feet.
Do you want to read them?
Go ahead.
Will be
Walking on water. You know it.
in 2 days.
Send the regulation call for assistance now.
What call should I send, sir?
The regulation call for assistance, CQD. Come on, man, wake up.
I need our position.
41, 46 north, 50, 14 west.
Going for a shower.
Just get a bloody move on.
Sir. It may take a few minutes.
Why not send SOS? It's the new call.
It's worth a try. Let me know as soon as the call comes through.
Yes, sir. He's a clever boy, then.
Phillips can reach every ship within the wireless range of 400 miles. Their best hope is the Californian, only 32 kilometers away and near enough to save everybody. But after receiving the rude message from Phillips, their wireless will remain switched off until morning.
Who is it?
It's the Frankfurt.
Okay, stand by.
Bloody useless.
The Titanic's powerful radio signal is reaching far afield. The Frankfurt is over 100 kilometers away. They need to contact a much closer ship.
I don't know why the Californian's not responding.
All steamships followed established tracks across the Atlantic. It was nicknamed the Transatlantic Railway. There were hundreds of ship movements every day, so there was always an opportunity of remaining in radio contact with another vessel or even seeing another vessel. You could call up assistance if you needed it.
It's the Carpathia. They're putting about and heading for us. Take this to the captain.
Excuse me, sir. Sir? It's from the Carpathia, sir. She's turned around and is coming along as quickly as she can.
No other ships?
The Frankfurt has told us to stand by. We're trying the Californian, but she's not replying.
Thank you, Mr. Bride.
Sir. Anything?
The Olympic might be on its way.
Even with only 16 lifeboats, everyone can be shuttled to safety if the Carpathia reaches the Titanic within 2 hours. The captain now knows the safety of his passengers is a race against time. The Titanic is badly damaged and taken on water fast. One of the ships nearby, the Carpathia, has picked up their distress signal and is on its way. For the thousands of passengers,
I can't
it's the
find the
only
damn
chance of
engine
rescue.
room. That's what I'm looking for.
She's 58 miles away, sir.
The Carpathia's top speed is no more than 15 knots.
She's 4 hours away, sir.
But we can only stay afloat for another 2 hours.
Perhaps you'd better return to the boat deck, Mr. Murdoch.
Captain.
People don't pay to look at lifeboats.
It's just another. Oh, the.
Captain
Yeah.
Smith knows exactly how many are on board. He knows exactly how many spaces he has in the lifeboats, and he knows exactly how long Titanic has to live. A very great many of the passengers on board are going to die. It's that point that Captain Smith suffered some sort of mental breakdown, because at that point the command structure falls apart on board.
And we better start getting the passengers into the lifeboats, sir. Sir.
Yes. Women and children first. Yes, let's do that.
Sir.
He's just totally out of it.
Light Hauler will later misinterpret the captain's command, with terrible consequences. 2-month-old Milvina Dean is one of the few third-class passengers to make it into a lifeboat. Now 96, she is the last living survivor.
Oh, wow.
Thought the ship was unsinkable, so they just stayed. My father was very quick on the uptake. He got
96 years old. She's the last survivor of the Titanic.
One at a time into the lifeboat. That's women and children only, sir.
And then my mother said goodbye to my father. They'd only been married about 4 years. And so she's so broken-hearted that she would never speak about it. Because I was small, they couldn't hold me and had to put me in a sack.
That's women and children only, sir.
Light Hauler interprets Captain Smith's orders as women and children.
Okay.
Halt away!
Allowed unnecessary deaths, caused unnecessary deaths.
It won't let me down. Damn it.
Many of the lifeboats are launched half empty. Ismay is on the starboard boat deck, helping women and children get into the last lifeboat.
Did you see how many passengers were put into this lifeboat?
No, I did not see at the time.
Did she appear to be full?
She was very full. Fairly full.
She wasn't full.
After all the women and children were in, and after all the people that were on the deck had got in, I got in as she was being lowered away.
There was no order to you to get in?
No. None.
Ismay is one of the few men to take a place in the lifeboats. The last lifeboat leaves with over 1,600 people left on board. The Titanic can stay afloat for only 30 more minutes. Time is rapidly running out. The Titanic is sinking.
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's a bug. Just figured I'd drop in for some food.
Then you've done your full duty, you can do nothing more. Abandon your cabin. It's every man for himself now.
The captain said we are to leave.
Just a moment.
While there is still electricity on board, Phillips tries to stay in communication with the Carpathia, updating her of the Titanic's situation.
What is it?
The Frankfurt's interfering with the Carpathia signal.
Although there are enough life jackets to go round, the chaos on the ship means that many are left without. Bride will later tell of a stoker from the boiler room who was forced to take desperate measures.
Hey, what are you doing? Jack, it's got your light. Jack, please.
He's not moving.
Let him rot.
Captain Smith is last seen in the bridge. He will go down with the ship. Over 2 hours after the collision with the iceberg, the Titanic sinks to the bottom of the ocean. Bride is one of 1,500 people that are plunged into the icy sea.
How did you come off from the boat deck?
I was swept off with a collapsible boat.
And was the water rising all the time?
Yes.
And then the water was flush with the boat deck?
Yes.
And swept this boat off into the sea, and you with it?
Yes. The last I saw of Phillips, he was standing on the deck house.
So then you found yourself in the water. What happened next?
I swam away from the Titanic.
When somebody goes in the water, especially very cold water, the first thing they're going to experience is panic and shock. As soon as you're subjected to water temperatures that are freezing or near freezing, as they undoubtedly were that night, disorientation and exhaustion and unconsciousness are likely within the first 15 minutes, and survival is only likely for 15 to 45 minutes. Your core temperature starts to go down. It's just a matter of time before hypothermia sets in. Whether you die because of the cold or you drown, it's an awful way to die. The best thing that somebody can do is to get out of the water if you can.
Both Bride and Lighthauler managed to stay out of the water by clinging onto an upturned lifeboat.
Oh, oops. Mike's muted. This is all new to me. You couldn't get up on A deck the last time, but holy shit, is it ever laggy up here.
Two hours after the Titanic sinks, the Carpathia arrives in the early morning light to rescue passengers. Bride survives, suffering only frostbite in his feet. But the Carpathia arrives too late for his friend and colleague Phillips, who dies in the sea. Of the 1,523 that die on April 14th, 1912, only 328 bodies are recovered. Most are buried in a cemetery in Halifax. Many of the bodies cannot be identified and are simply marked with a number.
They had found some of the bodies and took them to Halifax, but they never found my father's. You know, you stop and you wonder what had happened to him. If he'd jumped overboard or if he'd gone down the ship, or you have no idea what happened, which is quite awful.
It was mostly men who died, but that doesn't mean it was only men. That was part of the tragedy, that there were women and children in the water and not in the lifeboats was a part of that tragedy.
Yeah, they need to optimize it for sure.
There were quite a few children.
I said I want a cigarette so bad I can smell that room. 'Cause I'm pretty sure that's the, if I remember right, that's supposed to be the cigar room. But yeah, this place is dope. Like, damn.
To make sure this never happens again, the International Ice Patrol is set up after the Titanic tragedy.
One of the things we do every year is deploy wreaths as close to the position that the Titanic sank as possible.
It is with the great respect and reverence that we commemorate the anniversary of the sinking of the RMS Titanic here in the North Atlantic 96 years ago, and we remember the importance of our mission. We remember the over 1,500 souls who perished on that fateful day. April 15th, 1912. Drop, drop, drop.
Roger that, thank you.
The fact that over 1,500 people lost their lives is an awful thing, is an unspeakable thing that we don't ever want to happen again.
The findings of the inquiry were that the ship was traveling at excessive speed in an ice region, but that none of the crew were to blame. They were only carrying out standard practice for the time. It was recommended that in future, the number of lifeboats on the ship should be enough for all persons on board.
I think the inquiry is a whitewash, complete whitewash. You have the Board of Trade, in effect, inquiring into a disaster that's largely of its own making.
The inquiry also decided that Ismay did not influence the captain over speed and was not at fault over the design of the ship. The press was not so forgiving. They branded Ismay a coward for taking a place in a lifeboat. He resigns as chairman 6 months later and dies at the age of 74. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the inquiry makes no mention of the chain of events and decisions that caused the disaster. The 16 lifeboats, the height of the bulkheads, the change in the ship's direction, the wireless message that no officer would receive, the wireless message that is ignored, the Californian switching off its wireless, the lack of binoculars in the crow's nest, and the iceberg that is born at the same time as the Titanic and against all odds travels further south than is thought possible. But it will take nearly 100 years to reveal the fatal flaw located in the hull of the Titanic, which caused her to sink so quickly, just 2 hours away from rescue, and led to the death of over 1,500 people.
Right, absolutely. The only rooms that you weren't allowed to smoke in was the corridors. Was it down here? There should be a way for me to get out to one of the boat decks. And from the boat deck, there's a door that you open, and it takes you down to the boiler room. But you think I could remember how to get out there? Not fucking likely. Okay, this is the entrance, B-deck entrance, if I remember right.
Just before you watch it, I want to tell you about History
Hit
TV. It's like Netflix.
No, this is the other tea room.
A place where true history fans can go and find hundreds of documentaries and
Okay,
interviews
this
with
is
the
not,
world's
no. There we go.
Hi everyone, welcome to this
Oh god,
timeline
damn.
documentary. Just before you watch it, I want to tell you about my new history channel. It's called History Hit. It's like the Netflix for history. It's got hundreds and hundreds of history documentaries on there and interviews with some of the world's best historians. We're adding new stuff all the time. For example,
Alright.
filming in this
Oh, that's weird. They had like roll-up windows.
about the Dam Busters raid in 1943. If you want to know more about History Hit, follow the information.
No map? What the fuck?
Or search online for History
I
Hit.
think I have found a bug.
Use the code timeline to get a special introductory offer. Now enjoy this show.
Can I get in there? Maybe I can see the boiler room from here.
To me, it looked like a big hulk of steel. It looked so tall, it seemed to reach the sky. And it looked so long, there seemed to be no end to it. And I said, but Dad, how could that ship stay up in the water? Oh, he said,
son, that ship will always stay up in the water. Well, you see how wrong he was.
Smoking in the companionway is strictly prohibited. Okay, but it was down one of these corridors to get to the engine room. It brought me out to a boat deck.
An ancient city on the doorstep of Europe, where industry and commerce flourished for centuries. Today, it's better known as a city recovering from almost 4 decades of political violence. The world has been all too familiar with the tragic images that became synonymous with the name of Belfast. However, almost 100 years earlier, Belfast was to be linked with a very different tragedy, the memory of which was to haunt the city for much of the 20th
Yeah,
century.
this wasn't it, I don't think. No. Because this is right at the other end of the ship, if I remember right. Yeah, we're right at the stern now. So I've gone too far.
Titanic, and give her back to the city that gave birth to her.
Sammy, is that drink I smell of you? Look, do you not think times is hard enough without you spending what money we do have on beer?
And you're wasting it. Have great news. The lads are telling me they're building 2 new ships in the yard. The Olympic and the
I love that accent. Being from Newfoundland, it's like, it makes me feel like home.
The lads are saying there's loads of apprenticeships going. I'll put a word in.
Sammy, that's great news.
It was really busy. I mean, this was probably the biggest output of tonnage in the United Kingdom at that time. There were 2 shipyards here at the time, Harland and Wolff, and a smaller shipyard called Workman Clark. Harland and Wolff were referred to as the big yard, while Workman Clark were referred to as the wee yard. But in those days,
Shall we drop in for some food again?
There were 12 ships launched that year in Harland and Wolff. And really, as soon as one ship was launched, the slipway was cleared and the keel was laid for the next ship that was going to be constructed. So this really
Okay, so it's got to be down more.
Centre of shipbuilding for the United Kingdom and for the world as well.
Belfast was unlike any other Irish city. It was a major industrial centre, manufacturing, engineering, and of course shipbuilding. And shipbuilding was
this is a little different. Are those the boilers I hear? I think I hear boilers.
From the mid-19th century, and by the time Olympic and Titanic.
How the fuck do I get to them again?
About 15,000 people, and the shipyard had become the largest in the world.
Yes, this is the racket court again. See, I seem to remember this being open in number 3. Or in the third, this is the... This is the mail room.
But basically there were 3 ways of gaining employment in the shipyard in Titanic's time. One was as a premium apprentice.
See, like I can hear them. I can hear the boilers and the fire.
As a gentleman apprentice.
But you think I could remember how to get over there?
A master of no trade. You'd become a jack of all trades. And after that you'd be given a position as a junior manager and work your way up through that. The other way was then to come in and do the standard apprenticeship, where you would come in and do 5, 6 or 7 years of an indentured towards an apprenticeship. And again, your parents would have to pay a fee to Harland and Wolff for you to come into the shipyard. And the last way, and I always think a very cruel way of gaining employment, was the casual labour scheme. That was where in the morning you would find several hundred labourers standing outside the yard. The foreman would come out knowing that he needed maybe 50 or 60 men for the day, and would pick those men that he needed. And if you didn't get work at that particular time, there was no state benefits, so there was no money coming into the house, there was no food on the table, so it was quite a hard way to work.
Just let me into the boiler room, damn it.
My father was a joiner who worked in Harland and Wolff all his lifetime. He had a great pride, as many others had, in the building of this great ship. And I used to
I think they might have blocked it off.
When I was a wee fella, I used to draw wee pictures of the Titanic with the 4 funnels and the smoke coming out. But
there's no door down here, eh?
Occasionally he said to me, Johnny, I'm going to take you down on Sunday afternoon to see the Titanic. I couldn't wait until Sunday arrived. And we went down in a tram car to the Queen's Road. There he took me through the gates of the great shipyard, and just looking to the right, I saw this big, to me it looked like a big hulk of steel. It looked so tall, it seemed to reach the sky, and it looked so long, there seemed to be no end to it.
I took great interest in everything that was happening around me, particularly the great ship, the Titanic. And this ship...
Never mind, I was just down here.
...by Ulster people who had no coal.
But again, I can hear the damn boilers. They're like right on the other side of this wall. That's why I'm saying I honestly think they blocked it off, like they're working on it again.
My dad started explaining to me.
Mail call.
Lying on a slope, and it's been propped up with all those logs. Now, in a few weeks' time, he said, men called stagers will come along and they'll take all those logs away, and the ship will slide down into the water because there's grease below it.
On May the 31st, 1911, Titanic...
Yeah, I feel like it's out here. If I remember right, you went out here to the right, and there's two doors, like just on the other side of these stairs.
And it was a lovely day, sunshine, brilliant sunshine, and the smell of the sea and the shipyard, and thousands of workers and people waiting for the great event, and all the ships lying off, waiting for the launch, and suddenly
They wouldn't get it at sea, they would get it at the next stopping point, right? Like whatever port they stopped at next. So you would have to send the letter ahead and hope that it made it there before the ship.
a gentle push, and 30 seconds later it was in the water. It made a huge splash, and the sound of the withholding chains dragged along was terrific. And then the cheers broke out.
The Titanic's a very
I'm so confused now.
It's been with me all my life. Right?
Wait, what? Is there ladies and a men's side?
My father.
Oh no, never mind. Must be ladies' bathroom.
He came out of his time when the Titanic was launched, and he became a full. From being an apprentice, he became a journeyman metal worker.
My father told me again, I'm going to take you down to see the Titanic. And this time it looked more like a boat to me because it was in the final preparation stages for going away. It had the 4 funnels.
Yeah, that's totally weird.
The bridge, the mast, the lifeboats, and the gangways were all placed on it, and the workers were going up and down, carrying furniture on board and all sorts of electrical fittings. And I thought it was wonderful just to see it all. There it was in all its grandeur.
The shipbuilding at the height of its powers in Belfast, and those beautiful staterooms, all those finishing trades, and all the marvellous staircase inside the ship and everything.
As I'm walking up it.
Should have been
The marvelous staircase.
They had to do in Harland Wolff the sea trials for the vessels, and Titanic's was scheduled for the 1st of April 1912. They arrived down early in the morning, very early in the morning, and getting the ship ready to go for the sea trials when the weather was so bad that they waited and waited and waited, and finally late afternoon or early evening they made the decision that they couldn't do the sea trials because the weather was so bad, and it was abandoned for the day. They then came back on the 2nd of April and decided to do a shortened sea trials. Normally whenever Harland Wolff did their sea trials, they came out of Belfast Lough and headed north towards Glasgow, but for Titanic they came out and sailed south towards the Isle of Man, taking a lot shorter route. They left early in the morning, returned back in around about 6 o'clock in the evening, where the ship was turned around. At around about 8 o'clock at night, Titanic weighed anchor and started on her voyage over to Southampton, going out of Belfast Lough.
I watched the trials up and down Belfast Lough. It was a huge ship, and it was so big, it made the loch look quite tiny. It was a remarkable thing, but I was entranced by this, and eventually I watched her go off on the 2nd.
Okay, so this is all we can view up here so far is just this. I feel like that wasn't supposed to happen. The captain must have been hammered. No, they were going too fast.
He's my wee son going that big ship.
He's 17. And anyway, the sand's the safest ship's ever been built. He'll be alright.
Suppose you're right. He's a lucky boy going in that ship. I'll go and get my coat.
That was some occasion. There were thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah, see, like, oh, maybe you can on this one too. On the other demo, even like the White Star, like the menus, you could read the menus.
One of my favourite pictures of the Titanic being towed up the Belfast lock.
They were still doing the cosmetic details in it.
Oh.
Cleaning it. In fact, I spoke to one gentleman some years ago who's
Oh shit, 12 o'clock, eh? I should get some sleep. I gotta work tomorrow, so. Oh yeah, you totally could. Here, even if I go like this, go like that, go apply, save.
My friend Ralph Friars, who passed away, and I was with him at the time, the last thing I collected from him, and he had rolled it up and he'd written my name on it, and it was a beautiful
Yeah, there you go.
Titanic Society, and it's a marvelous
Fillets of brill. I don't know what any of that is. Corned beef, I know what that is. Ooh, that sounds good. Corned beef, vegetables, and dumplings. Mmm. Grilled mutton chops. Fuck yeah. And apparently this is actually like what was on the Titanic. It was.
That's typical of Royal. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a celebration. The tragedy happened later. It was something that the city was so proud of, the shipyard men were so proud of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
All of a sudden, you could have heard this swish.
Ugh, salmon mayonnaise? That doesn't sound good. Potted shrimp sounds good. Norwegian anchovies sounds good. Soused herring sounds good. Plain smoked sardines sounds good. Roast beef, fuck yeah.
From the sang Rule Britannia. Little did we think it was, sadly, indeed, goodbye.
Yeah, the salmon mayonnaise, like what the fuck is that?
On April the 15th,
Salmon mayonnaise.
4 days into her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York, the Titanic struck an iceberg. The wound to her hull.
Oh, shite. Well, I think I'm gonna head to bed, my dude. That's a good way to end the stream with the little boy running through the streets yelling. Okay, have a good night, Chris. Thanks for watching, my dude. We shall, I'll be on again tomorrow after work, so tomorrow evening I'll be back on. Probably about 5:30. Talk to you then. Take it easy, bro. Peace.